Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. We are here today to talk about how generative AI can enhance your organization. It's a topic on everyone's minds, and it's an important topic because generative AI has the potential to enhance your organization in a number of ways, a number of important ways, depending on your industry and your specific goals. Now, the first one that comes to my mind is automated content generation. This is certainly a strength for generative AI. Generative AI can help us create content such as articles, blog posts, product descriptions, reports. And this, of course, can extend into marketing collateral and social media posts and email campaigns, customer support. Another important enhancement is recommendation systems. We're familiar with recommendation systems, perhaps from Amazon or Netflix. We can use generative AI to build recommendation engines that offer personalized product or content recommendations to customers, hopefully improving user engagement and hopefully boosting sales and profit. Natural language processing has spawned chatbots and virtual assistants that can provide customer support, answer common queries and questions, handle routine tasks efficiently. And sentiment analysis can analyze customer reviews and feedback to gain insight into customer sentiment and make data-driven decisions about our marketing spend or our efforts to provide superior customer experience. There are a number of other advantages we won't go into here in detail, but things like data augmentation, process automation, design prototyping, translation, multilingual support, risk management, fraud detection. These are just a few of the many, many, many ways that generative AI has the potential to enhance your organization. But how do you get there? Well, one essential first step is to assess your organization's specific goals and resources and industry requirements to determine how generative AI can best be integrated into your operations. And think about how generative AI is more than just a technology, but really an enabling approach to enhance and optimize your organization in ways that really matter in terms of productivity, innovation, and competitiveness. But it's also important to consider the ethical and privacy implications of data security and potential biases when implementing generative AI. So we'll talk about that today and some best practices to consider with the adoption of generative AI. How do you identify and avoid the risks while really moving the needle? And what are some our legal and ethical responsibilities? And how should we define a comprehensive AI governance? That's what we'll be discussing today with a great panel of guests. But before I bring our guests on board, I do want to say quickly that we want to hear from you too. I'd like to encourage everyone attending to today to participate. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way for our guests, please enter them into the chat feature. That's where I'll be looking for your questions. And I will attempt to get some of them into the flow of the show today. And we'll certainly have a few minutes also near the end for your questions. All right, with all of that said, let's bring on our panel of guests today, starting with Martin Miller. Martin, are you with us? Welcome
Hi,
aboard,
Kevin.
Martin.
I'm here.
Hello, hello. It's welcome aboard. It's great to have you with us. Now, Martin is former director of AI and machine learning production operations at Levi Strauss, but currently a fractional, excuse me, fractional CTO. I'm not quite sure what a fractional CTO. I'll have to ask about that. With Fast CTO and MVision, where he assists clients to build solutions with AI enablement. Paul, welcome aboard. Have not said hello to you yet. And a fun fact about Paul, you're a black belt martial artist. I am also a black belt. What is your art that you study, Paul?
Mine is called Tukong Musul. It's a Korean special forces martial art. So it's a combination of Taekwondo and Kung Fu and some other techniques.
Okay, very good, very good. I'm familiar with some of those. I'm a karate man myself. We'll have to talk about that at some other time, Paul. But welcome aboard, both Paul
Thank you.
and Martin. All right, okay, let's get ourselves settled in now. We're here to talk about generative AI. What are the advantages? How can it really enhance our operations? And to get us started today, I'd like to point us to an article published recently by NBusiness that talks about new generative AI tools for content creators released recently in YouTube. AI-generated video backgrounds and a dubbing tool are among the new offerings. It's called Dream Screen, and it's a generative AI feature that will allow creators to add generative AI video or image backgrounds to their shorts simply by typing in an idea into a prompt. YouTube is also introducing Aloud, which is an AI-powered dubbing tool that allows creators to reach audiences beyond their primary language. The feature is currently being tested in English, Portuguese, and Spanish, with other languages to come out soon. Next year, YouTube is also planning to allow creators to use generative AI for video ideas and draft outlines. So, Paul and Martin, my question to you is, what advantages do you feel that these new tools will bring to organizations in terms of video creation and content creation, and what will the impact be on the digital transformation of content creation in general? Martin, do you have a thought on the article today?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think we're in the early phases of this. I'll call it's similar to the AI gold rush. I'll call it that. And some of the output that you're seeing today is entertaining materials, not fully polished. So it's often used for initiation of an idea or initiation of filler or trying to do full length content. You can. But as a creator myself, I step back and I go look and go, well, I might not present something in that format or that methodology or with those words because it's not my authentic voice. But it's a great start for starting to re-edit and polish something up.
And it seems to me that I would expect that this is the future that we're starting to see unfold in terms of automated or AI-powered content generation. Martin, what are your thoughts, or Paul, what are your thoughts about this, and especially the enablement of different languages? The dubbing tool sounds very intriguing to me, helping me create content in languages that are beyond my primary language.
Yeah, I think this one illustrates a couple of really valuable uses of generative AI. It opens up accessibility by doing language translation and doing text-to-text conversion for many purposes. And it also illustrates the ways that generative AI can be used to boost creativity. So you can take an idea, you can let the AI send back to you different variations on that idea. In this case, taking a text idea and sending you back an image interpretation of that. So I think it's a good example of two really useful, productive uses of AI.
As a content creator myself, I'm a writer, video guy, interviewer. I have some fear about this, right? I don't want AI to put me out of work, but at the same time, it really takes a lot of the heavy lifting off of the shoulders of content creators in ways that can really enable even perhaps a higher degree of creativity. How is this being applied? How do you feel that this will be applied in business? Martin, you've been with Levi. You're working with organizations now to build solutions that have AI enablement. Do you feel that this is just another mile marker on the road to the ways that generative AI will impact our world?
Kevin, great question. I like to kind of step back and look at it this way, and I don't believe AI is replacing you, Kevin, but another Kevin using AI might replace the Kevin not using AI, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does, indeed. Indeed. And Paul, what about growth acceleration partners? Are you folks looking at these tools in the ways that you're bringing solutions to your customers and maybe even the digital transformation of growth acceleration partners itself?
Sure. Yeah, Kevin, great point. We're using it in two ways. One, our own digital transformation to increase the productivity and creativity of our team, but also working with our clients to make sure that their data is ready and that they have not only an AI strategy, but a data strategy that supports that.
All right, very good. Well, if you are interested in this article, it is posted here in the chat. I encourage everyone to go over there and take a peek. And indeed, let us know what you think in the chat section here. What do you feel will be the impact impact of these new tools and other tools that are on the horizon in terms of content creation and indeed process automation itself. We'd like to hear from you too as well. All right, well, very good. Let's get into our main discussion points today, starting with how generative AI will impact knowledge management and the future of work. I guess that's what we're getting at here today. And Paul, when we talked earlier before the program, you felt that it was important to demystify AI in general, what it is and what it is not. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Sure, Kevin. I think it's important to recognize that this is an evolution in technology that's been coming for quite some time. There's been continued building in data models, in how data is handled. Underneath it, there's a lot of very complex mathematics and computer science, but underneath it all it's really just an evolution of using computer technology to sort of boost human productivity. So it's really a natural step in the evolution of how we use computing and data.
So we shouldn't be concerned at all. It's really just another step in the development of technologies that impact our world. Say the development of the iPhone, for example, or even the advent of Google. Remember when Google came out and seemed how revolutionary that was? Do you feel that this is just another, I wouldn't say ho-hum, but in terms of its fearful impact to our world, maybe we're being a little over fearful of the advent of generative AI?
I think it's good to be cautious and to go in with eyes wide open, but I think the opportunity far outweighs the risk. One of the ways that I like to describe it to people is that, when we created power woodworking tools, we didn't put carpenters out of business. We made them way more productive and increase their ability to craft. So I think generative AI tools are similar in that in skilled hands, they can help enhance productivity, enhance creativity, and give us better starting points to do what we do, only faster.
And Martin, what's your take on this? How will generative AI impact knowledge management and the future of work as you see it?
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for the question. The opportunity is huge for correlated privatized data that's not in the wild to be used for corporate gains, such as how you onboard a new employee, the standard operating procedures of a certain organization, perhaps the way an organization develops, the way it has a writing style for certain types of output. You can imagine a legal firm could really leverage how they do their writing for their clients and on behalf of presentations for legal matters that hit court cases, et cetera, or analyzing large volumes of data. It may take fewer humans to review the libraries of data. So there's a huge tooling advantage here for those that will leverage the capability of it. And it comes back to what data are you using your generative AI with?
All right. So the impact of knowledge management and the future of work, it seems to me, is really an enablement, just another level of enablement, as you mentioned, power tools, if you will, right? Power tools for things like content creation, for, as I mentioned earlier, things like risk analysis. It could be automated content creation. It could be chatbots and virtual assistants. Let's talk a little bit about that, Paul. What are your thoughts about using chatbots and virtual assistants for customer service and customer experience? Again, is that just a tool that will soon be a commonplace tool that we see every day? Or indeed, is it a tool that is common already today?
I think it's becoming more common as people build their digital knowledge base. As Martin said, with very complex systems and complex interactions, it's difficult for a human to consume all of that content, but an AI system can easily consume and organize very large amounts of complex data. And then with a with a voice interface or an easy text interface, it gives a very nice way for self-service for information, whether that's a internal knowledge base, how do I report my vacation, or how do I file an expense report, or a help system, which is how do I upgrade the version of software on my desktop. Those kinds of things will lend themselves well toward these type of solutions, and they're being put in place today. So I think we'll see more and more of that use case.
All right, very good. Well, leads me to think about some of the impacts of this. I mean, what are the risks about this? Do customers really want a chatbot interacting with them? I'm not certain. Sometimes I really like it. Other folks hate it. My wife hates it when she gets into a chat box. I sort of like it. But there's a risk to customer service, customer impression. There are other risks and obstacles in the adoption of generative AI. So I'd like to bring that up as a topic now. What are the risks that we should be considering? And what are the obstacles in the adoption of generative AI? I guess those maybe would be perhaps two big questions. But I'll start with you, Paul. What do you feel are some of the risks, the downsides now of some of these tools that we're seeing emerge?
Yeah, well, I think you had an adjoining question or comment earlier, Kevin, around knowing where the data comes from. These models are all trained from data somewhere. And as we like to say in the software industry, garbage in, garbage out. So, so one of the risks is the transparency or lack thereof of where the models are trained. If you don't know where it's getting its data or how it's making its decisions, you're a little bit blind as to understanding the quality of the recommendations that it's bringing back, or the accuracy of the content. So, so losing track of the sources of data is one, and related to that is the risk that it'll make us a little bit lazy, where we'll just accept it as fact and not question as much. And so we'll see more and more because it's presenting information in a format and language that appears authentic and reliable, that more and more people will be saying it must be true because I saw it on the internet. So that's a definite risk area here.
Well, that's interesting, Paul. How do I know what data is being used? I really don't know that. I use ChatGPT. I don't know where it's getting its information from. It seems legitimate, but I have no idea. Is there a way that I can identify that content base that it's using for its responses?
It varies from tool to tool. Some vendors are publishing the data sources. There's some developments now underway to provide traceability, so that when you get a result, it would also give you the basis for those results, like what was the source data that was used to compile it. In the meantime, the best thing to do is to use common sense to get what you receive back from generative AI. Use it, but take it with a grain of salt. Accept that there may be something there that may not be 100% accurate, or maybe from a source that you wouldn't otherwise trust. So use it as a starting point. Use your own judgment about what you trust, and do secondary research if you have doubt.
Martin, what are some of the other risks that we should consider? For example, what's your take on emergent capabilities? I don't know a lot about emergent capabilities, but certainly what I've read has been a little disturbing. Systems that all of a sudden emerge with capabilities that were unexpected, or it learns new languages without being told to, or what are some of the risks of some emergent tech capabilities that might come up with AI solutions, and is that really something that we should be concerned about?
It's a great question, and just kind of leaning back a little bit, is it truly intelligence, or is it a machine operating to responses or emotions or creative thought? It's difficult to pin these down. As you can imagine, Kevin, you could fall in love via chat with a human, or you can fall in love via chat with a bot, and for me, I couldn't fall in love with that either way via chat. I would have to see them and talk with them. And so I'm not looking at my emotions being captured appropriately via a mechanized system. And I would hope others would also follow suit. But to Paul's point, or was it Kevin's point? We were talking about common sense, and let's step back and recognize that our frame of reference might be common for us, but it's not common. And it's our years of expertise and experience that helps drive us to synthesize as humans and drive higher value. So the risks are assuming truth is coming out of the machine. That is the biggest risk.
Okay. Well, that's a risk when you're working with me too. Well, all right.
That you'll be
Okay, well,
there.
we talked a little bit. Well, we've talked a little bit about the risks, but I want to move on to the opportunities, or getting to the opportunities. What are some obstacles that are in the way of adoption that organizations should consider? Say I'm a CEO or a CTO. I want to move forward and adopt AI in ways that are ardent, in ways that are perhaps aggressive to gain a competitive advantage. What are some of the obstacles that I need to consider first off in my adoption of generative AI? Martin, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah. So, Kevin, I would start with the focus and the what's the return on investment here, and then step back for what are some of the obstacles to getting there. And depending on what your focus is, it could be regulatory, it could be compliance obstacles, and those obstacles are real and there for a reason. If you're proposing to do medical diagnosis, then you want to look at where our in the U.S. at least, where the FDA pops in and starts chiming in on the use of synthesized solutions, and look at the trial cases that it has to review for approval. And so that's a huge risk. As a CTO, I embrace it. I look for how I can do more in less time, and maybe trial examples of things to experiment, show results sooner. I may not like the results, but I'd rather be judged earlier than wait 9 months to be judged when I can be judged in hours, as a huge advantage for anyone.
Interesting. Paul, what are some of the obstacles we should consider when adopting generative AI, and how do we avoid those obstacles?
Yeah, I see two big obstacles. One Martin alluded to earlier with the gold rush to AI. Everyone's so focused on the end goal that they lose sight of the underpinning, which is the data and the data quality. So many companies, they want to do AI, they want to have predictive models or use generative AI in creative ways, but the data that they want to use to source those systems is not organized or gathered properly. So we see one of the big obstacles is really having a good data strategy and having good data quality to be used for these systems. Another large one consideration is around security and privacy. So if you have a completely closed system and you contain all the data and you're not using any outside sources, it's not as big an issue. But when you're taking advantage of some of these large language models like ChatGPT, the content, the prompts that you give to ChatGPT, the content that you publish becomes part of its training model. So you have to be careful to keep your proprietary information proprietary, and make sure that it doesn't become part of the model that is trained to share with everyone else. So those are two of the big hurdles that people are wrestling with in adoption today.
We are here today with Martin Miller and Paul Brunel, both expert CTOs. We're talking about generative AI and its impact and its potential to optimize and accelerate our organization. If you have a question for Martin or Paul, please feel free to enter that into the chat feature. We would love to have your thoughts as well, so please feel free to chat away. We will have some time later here in the session for your questions for Martin and Paul. All right, very good. We've talked a little bit about the risks. We've talked a little bit about the opportunities. We've talked a little bit about the potential impact. Let's talk a little bit more now about the ethical and legal responsibilities that we should be looking at when defining a comprehensive AI governance approach. There are a number of ethical and legal responsibilities. I would like to ask about bias in generative AI. Martin, I'm not an expert in bias. Can you give us a little bit of a grounding on what bias is and why it's important that we should consider it and try to avoid bias in our use of generative AI?
Kevin, that is a very insightful question to be responding to. And let me step back for a moment. I can speak to bias in that, when you think of how something is trained and the knowledge that it's trained to absorb, and you think of what's in the wild, if it's using public sources, pick your favorite news channel and all the transcriptions of that, from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. And, everybody's reporting a truth of some sort. It's just whose truth is it? And what defines what a truth is? Bias in terms of male, female, bias in terms of, perception of ideology, bias in terms of, let's just say it, race, skin color, emotions. It's out there. It's in the wild. You have people generating content. It's being absorbed by machines in the wild and being resynthesized for outputs. And that may or may not be the right thing to do for a corporate point of view, specifically. And it could put out output that you could be talking to, on C-SPAN about why your financial results are diminishing because you let the output of your machine spew out information that is incorrect or untrue or hateful. So really critical to focus on what are you trying to do with your AI? How are you training it? What defines the truth you want to represent? And we get into areas, and let me just pontificate for a second, where people are talking about hallucinations, and the
Yes.
hallucinations may actually be a truth. It's not the truth you want to hear or believe because it's a piece of a puzzle that the machine figured out as believing it's something to put out as a truth. It isn't the truth the human wanted to hear or the truth the human could perceive as valuable or useful.
Hallucinations, that's an interesting topic as well. And Paul and Martin, please, what are exactly hallucinations? I'm not an expert. What are hallucinations and how do we avoid them?
Generative AI is trained to generate. So when you present a question or a prompt to generative AI, it's going to give you an answer based on the information that it has. If it doesn't have 100% information to fill in all the blanks, it will fill it in with something. So so that's called a hallucination, where it takes a mixture of data that it has, adds some additional data to make a complete response, but that data is not based in fact anywhere. So it's trained to take what it has and give you an answer, even if it has to fill in the blanks with some random content to make it sound good.
I see. The machine is just doing its thing, right? It's
right.
just trying to create this content. It will fill in the blanks because that's what it's going to do. So then it's really a point of how we train it and how we design the system and what parameters it is used it is instructed to use to operate. How do we ensure that? I mean, it seems like it's a little bit still mysterious. Martin, you said there was really no magic in any of this. How do we train our systems to avoid these kinds of downsides that seem to be almost out of our control?
Yeah. Great question. And leaning into coming back to what's important in a digital transformation world, it all comes back to data correlation, data quality, data governance. And if you take data from the wild, you will get these kind of outcomes where you may not like what you're seeing, you may not believe what you're seeing, and it's not the truth you want to hear. And I use the word truth with a double air quote here, in that you think of watching a jury trial. You have 12 of your peers out there, or maybe not your personal peers, but someone's peers listening to a story about someone's position on a crime and whether they're guilty, not guilty, etc. And you can have 12 people having a different concept of what the truth is after listening to it, and then you get a hung jury. So I question, what is the truth when we talk about these hallucinations also?
What is the truth? Yeah, that's a good question. You have to know the truth to understand whether you're receiving it or not, I suppose. All right, very good. All right, we've talked a little bit about the ethical responsibilities, perhaps not enough about the legal responsibilities and where things will be headed in the future in terms of our legal responsibilities around the world. And each country will, of course, have their own ways of dealing with this. Paul, what are some of the legal responsibilities that we should consider when adopting and designing AI and AI governance?
Well, I think some of the fundamentals are in data protection and data privacy. So making sure that we are protecting information that should be kept private, that we're not submitting it into sources so that it becomes data in the wild. As data processors, we really have a responsibility to know the content that we're using and know whether the tools we're using with that content cause it to become public or continue to ensure its privacy. So I think we have a responsibility to at least be aware of how the tools work and whether they are going to make the data we submit to them public or not, and to protect the data accordingly.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. We are starting to round the corner of our session today. Before we go, I would want to say that if you have any questions for our guests, now would be the time to pop them into the chat feature. We'd love to get your questions and your comments today. We do have a question, gentlemen, from Lauren Templeton. Thank you, Lauren, for your contribution today. Lauren is asking, I think, what's on the minds of everyone today. What is the future prospects of generative AI? Say a year from now, 5 years from now. I'll ask it to both of you. Martin, I'll start with you. What is the future prospects of generative AI?
Yeah. So in the creator world, it's lowering the bar for entry. Originally the creator world is for people that are creative in that they have ideas, concepts, and they're able to put them out into written, verbal, and musical form, or videography, if you think about true creative. And putting out the scenery, the background, the aesthetics of a film. The future of generative AI may actually lean into doing special effects, lighting.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of compute, and that compute is not a low bar to entry for that high-end type of application. But the bar to entry for the textual applications, that bar is lowering, and there are many great paths to leveraging that end of the API available in the public forum or privatized enterprise versions to building solutions. I think the future is very bright. I like being able to travel the world, and maybe I can't communicate and understand a language, but I speak my English. It outputs the native language. I might look like a silly person holding my phone to a person communicating, but it may play an interesting role there.
Yeah, almost a universal translator, really, as we've seen in the old Star Trek show, right? Paul, what is your feeling about the future prospects of generative AI?
I think, Kevin, we're going to see a lot of experimentation over the next 1 to 5 years. There's going to be, like any new technology, there are going to be 1,000 new ideas where people try it. 10 or 15 of those are going to be revolutionary and really change the productivity in that space dramatically. And of course, there'll be a lot of failed experiments as well, where people try things and it doesn't help at all, or it turns out to take you down a sideways path. So I think there's a lot of exploration ahead in the next few years, but the opportunities are really tremendous.
Lauren is asking about Spotify. Spotify CEO said AI music is, quote, tricky. What are your thoughts on this? I think this is an interesting question because indeed, I am a composer and a musician and been for many, many, many years. And musicians are concerned about AI generative music. However, Spotify is a big distributor of music. They're seeing an opportunity to cut out record companies and musicians out of the entire process and generate AI music on their platform. It kind of makes sense from their point of view. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts on this whole idea of Spotify and AI generated music? Paul, what are your thoughts?
I think one of the big challenges that we're seeing in both music and art are the ownership challenges. So generative AI has to be trained on something, so it's using some source material. Imagine you're the only composer ever in the history of the world. The generative AI is just copying your work and repurposing it. So I think there's serious questions about who owns the content. What is generative AI actually able to do to repurpose content? What's legal use and acceptable use of intellectual property? I think those questions are going to take some time to settle out, to figure out. And I think we've seen with the writers' strike some of the same challenges. The writers have been making points about use of AI that's been trained on their content, that the producers then do they have the ability to use AI to repurpose that content, or don't they? Those are all the kinds of questions that we're going to wrestle with as more and more content becomes available.
Paul, thank you for jumping in. And the time remaining, your thoughts?
I echo the same sentiment of Paul. In the case of Spotify, they're the holder of content that is, with other people's rights to it. And so that's a very questionable area to use for training. The suspect of training creative content from content truly licensed from someone else very much crosses a line of legal, intellectual property ownership. So no magic. I mean, I think that's taboo and should not be allowed.
All right. Thank you so much. We have been here today with Martin Miller and Paul Brunel. We've been talking about generative AI and its impact to your organizations and the potential future of generative AI. Gentlemen, in the time remaining, I'd like to ask you each about if you have one action item for our listeners who are looking to jump in and adopt generative AI in a ardent way, what would it be? Martin, I'll start with you. Do you have an action item for us today?
Sure. For the audience that has not actually tried to use ChatGPT or Bard, please go out and become enabled to access it. Do your trial and error. Find out for yourself what you're seeing. Also on the artistic side, there's a service called Leonardo.ai. Go out there. You can use it for free. You can plug in a prompt and come back with a creative image. I love to see people try this to get examples of what you can do with generative AI.
Very good. All right. And Martin, or Paul, excuse me, do you have an action item for us today?
Yeah, I'd say that it's twofold. One, if you're thinking about AI and generative AI, consider your data sources and your data strategy, so to make sure you don't lose sight of the importance there of the underlying data. And as a practical tool set, we're huge believers in the text to code capability. So the generative AI tools as a toolkit for a software engineer, software developer, they're making real gains, creating real productivity benefit today, and those tools are ready for prime time. So if you were to look at one tool from a business perspective in software engineering, I would look at generative AI tools for software development.
All right, very good. That is Paul Brunel and Martin Miller. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your patience today, and thank you for your expert advice. It's been a great panel. Your perspectives and advice were spot on, so thank you so much, and I hope that we'll get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone attending us today, thank you too. Join us next time on October 10th at 1600 British Standard Time when we will talk with another great panel of experts, next time about integrating operational technology, or OT, and IT data in your manufacturing transformations. It should be another great discussion. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. You can check me out. I'm Kevin Crane. And check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that will do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. And until next week, I am Kevin Crane. Thank you for watching.